Hey, it's Tim here. In today's video, we're hopefully going to finish the Getting Started with Snowflake guide that I've been working through over the last few weeks and essentially sharing it as a video. So in the last video, what we did is we finished working with the semi-structured data that we were using. We were actually using some JSON weather data. And so we actually just finished running through this module here, module number 7. We basically loaded up some JSON data and we kind of showed the power of Snowflake, essentially saving you a whole lot of effort and sort of hassle in terms of working with JSON or semi-structured data in this particular case, and just making it super easy to work with. And so what we had done in that exercise, we basically got to the end of this exercise and we sort of cut the video there. Now, the next stage is actually to use time travel. So today we're going to talk about what time travel is in Snowflake. We're going to do some general account admin as well. I'm already using Snowflake as a proper customer, as it were. So some of this might sort of look a bit different to what we go through in the exercise, but essentially it's just me on here, so you kind of get a basic insight into what I'm using it for. The last thing we'll do is we'll go and sort of go through some of these other areas to do with data sharing and the data marketplace, and then we'll reset the Snowflake environment so that you don't have anything that's been set in this tutorial sort of sticking around costing you money over time. The storage is the only real thing to worry about. Everything else shouldn't, because unless someone uses those database tables, they're sort of not doing anything. You're just paying for the storage, and storage on Snowflake is pretty cheap. It's actually very, very, very competitive, and so it's not something big to worry about. But nevertheless, we'll go through this last step here to get everything sort of reset. So let's try and make our way through this. I really want to try and finish it in this particular video so we can sort of keep this series nice and compact. For those of you who are joining this premiere or watching this premiere as it premieres for the first time, thank you so much. You've probably figured out a pattern. Sundays, 8 p.m. GMT is when we're going to be doing these going forward. I'm going to pretty much turn it into something like Snowflake Sundays, where every Sunday I'll try and share my videos showing you what I've learned during the course of the week. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let's get straight into the topic content and yeah, let's figure our way out. Let's look at this guide here. So Snowflake's time travel capability enables historical data access at any point with a pre-configurable period of time. Within a pre-configurable period of time. So essentially you can change the time that you can travel back in time essentially. The default window is 24 hours, and with Snowflake's Enterprise Edition, it can be up to 90 days. So essentially by default, this is going to be what everyone gets, 24 hours is standard feature. If you have the Enterprise Edition, you can bump that all the way up to 90 days, which is kind of cool. Imagine being able to go back 90 days in the past and run a query as if you were running it 3 months ago. Let's say maybe someone in the business asked a question today and then 3 months later asked the same question but changed it ever so slightly. You could essentially go back in time and run the query at that specific point in time, which is kind of cool. Most data warehouses cannot offer this functionality, but you guessed it, Snowflake makes it easy. That's a sort of, that should be a t-shirt. Snowflake makes it easy. That'd be a really good one. Some useful applications include restoring data related objects such as tables, schemas, and databases that may have been deleted, duplicating and backing up data from key points in the past, analyzing data usage and manipulation over specific periods of time. And so, yeah, those are just sort of a couple of examples, but it's sort of interesting because actually this opens up a lot of possibilities. It's the kind of thing that you also maybe want to think about, because it sort of opens up slightly different operational sort of capabilities that you maybe didn't have before. When you've got this sort of ability to go back in time up to 90 days, you can actually build that into sort of some of your standard ways of working. Let's read more into it. So let's drop and undrop a table. So here you can see that you can drop the weather JSON data. Okay, so let's go back into my worksheet. Just for context here, I'm working in the Snowflake interface. You don't have to do this. You can work in any other tool. In fact, my colleague Jonathan McDonald, who's a server guru, discovered that there's actually a plugin for I forgot the name, VS Code. So there's actually a plugin for VS Code. Let me see if I can get VS Code up, and I can actually just show you the plugin itself. So I'm not going to log into Snowflake with it. I've already got something here, but I just want to show you that everything we're doing can be done in different tools. So if I just go in here and I just search Snowflake, I think what happens is when you find the plugin, it automatically installs the relevant things required. So I'll just go into the database and just I'm actually searching in the wrong place here. I need to go to the extensions and search Snowflake, not the file browser. So here we go. Snowflake driver for SQL. I think this is the one. Yeah, SQL tools. Yeah, this is the one. So if you click install, it goes ahead and installs it. And once it's installed, you'll see that it's installed just here. It says installing. I think it's installing everything that it needs to install in the back end as well. And you can also see that there's this little sort of sign up there, but now you can see that it's finished installing. And when it finishes, an additional icon appears here on the bottom left. So I have something called Docker, which is what this icon here is. And then it adds an additional icon on the bottom, which is basically telling you that, hey, you've got some additional capabilities here to work with databases. Go to that tab, add a new connection, and you can of course see there's a Snowflake connection there. Click on that and you're off to the races. Essentially you get a basic sort of database tool right here in VS Code. Like VS Code can do literally everything at this rate. It's pretty amazing what Microsoft have done with this tool and sort of open it up and made other people sort of build things. And VS Code is also built using browser technology, so it's going to work pretty much exactly the same as sort of what we're using here with the worksheet. Okay, so just that sort of small tangent just to let you know that you don't have to do everything we're doing using the web interface. You can use whatever tool you want to use. Most of the queries we're running are just queries, so if you know how to run queries and your tool supports Snowflake, then you're going to be able to use it. Okay. So let's go back to this little guide. What they want us to do is drop a table and then undrop it essentially. So from the worksheet, run the following drop command to remove the JSON weather data. So this is just basically going to delete this table. So let's go ahead and run this. We're still using the weather data. So the key thing when you're running any queries, we're using the JSON weather data, but this isn't going to work unless you've got your context set correctly. And my context is still sysadmin compute warehouse weather public. I'm not using the analytical warehouse like it suggested. I'm just using the small one because I'm actually paying for this at this current point in time. So I'm going to save myself a little bit of hassle, and the small one runs just as fast for this kind of small query. So it's perfectly fine. We'll go and try and load 10 rows from this data that we've just deleted, and we should get an error essentially because this data doesn't exist. So you can see here that it says JSON weather data does not exist or is not authorized. So the reason that's not working is because again, just to sort of really make this clear and apparent, we've just run this command to drop the data. So that's why we're not seeing the data there. So the next step is to just undo that step, which is kind of nice. It has a nice little command for that. So undrop table JSON weather data, hit run, and then it will just basically undo that, and it will say here table JSON weather data is successfully restored. And we're pretty much sort of good for the races. So if we just go back, make sure there's no sort of any additional context that we're missing. Nope, there's no additional context there. It's really that easy. Sometimes when things are easy, there's sort of nothing to talk about. So, it just is what it is. So let's go ahead to the next step, which is rolling back a table. So this is essentially where you've made a mistake, you've changed something, and you'd like to roll it back. You'd like to undo that change. Now, in some databases, that's not possible. So what they do is they take it back up, they take a clone or whatever, and then they work on something. And if something goes wrong, then you have some sort of point in time you can go back to essentially. But with Snowflake, you kind of don't need to stop and do that because it kind of lets you do that anyway with this time travel feature. So let's go back and look at the guide here. So roll back a table. Let's roll back a table previous state to fix an unintentional DML error that replaces all the station names in the CityBike database trips to a table with the word oops. So it looks like what we're going to do here is we're going to make sure we work in the right place. And then we're going to basically make a change that is going to be a deliberate mistake. Okay. And the deliberate mistake is we're going to change all the bike station points to be called oops, essentially. And so when we then run the query, we should see a table just says oops and the number of records. You can actually see that here. It says oops, 61 million records, which is the exact number of records we have in the actual table that we loaded from S3. So normally we would need to scramble and hope we have a backup lying around, which is what I was saying earlier on. In Snowflake, we can simply run commands to find the query ID of the last update command and store it in a variable called query ID. So we're going to basically make a mistake. We're going to then look at the data, realize we've made a mistake, and we're going to figure out, hey, what was that query that made that mistake? And so that's what this little piece of SQL is. We'll do this in a second. Once we find the query, we're going to store that query somewhere. So we're going to call it in a variable called query ID. If you're used to programming, you'll be used to this. So you always store variables all the time. But if you're not used to programming, it's quite common in most tools where there's any sort of scripting to be able to store information in something called a variable. A variable is just like it's like putting something in your memory, like noting something down and then being able to call it a little later on. So variable called query ID, and then what we can do with that variable is recreate the table with the correct station names from the point in time before that query, essentially. So create or replace table trips as, and then select star from trips before this statement query ID, essentially. So go back in time before this query was run, and it will basically restore the table right before this query was executed, which is kind of cool. And then we'll run the query and we'll be able to see it sort of happening. So I just talked my way through that. It's very, very sort of simple, but now we're going to actually try and do it. So we're here in 7.2. So we need to make sure we're using the right database. So you can see here, it says use database, CityBike, use schema public. You can run this query here by just sort of highlighting and hitting run. The other thing you could do is you could go up here and change it manually. So you can do things sort of multiple ways. Depending on your tool, it might also give you the option to change this. So I'm actually just going to click on the top here and show you how to do that. So here I just need to go to CityBike, and we need to make sure it's on public. Public is the one that comes up by default, so I don't need to change that. So now we are doing things as we should be. And the other thing to note is, because I haven't done anything for a while, my compute warehouse has actually stopped. So you can see here it's not green because I haven't done anything for a while. So there's nothing for the database to be doing. So it switched it off temporarily. As soon as I run the next query, of course, it will sort of switch it back on. So just so you can see that, let's go ahead and highlight these two rows and hit run. And once we've done that, you'll see that this will update to being green in a second. So just give it 1 second and we'll just think it might actually be waiting for me to do something that requires like a query. So if I just do this step, then I think this will go green. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. So I think I misunderstood how that particular thing works. I think it only spools up the database when this is actually available. Okay. So you can actually see here that this is called trips dev 2. Now I actually made a mistake the first time I went through this, and what I had to do is I had to fix this essentially. So my way of fixing it was to basically create another dev instance and sort of carry on. So you can see here I've actually made a mistake. So let me just go ahead and remove the number 2 there and run this again, and now we should have this working. So if we hit run, you'll see that it's actually going to go off and run those queries. Now I'm just going to go down here and just make sure that I remove all inferences of this thing, because I'm fairly certain that I should have changed this back. I could have copied it all back, but I sort of wanted to learn as well. So I made a mistake and I was trying to fix it. So I took another copy, I set it to trips dev 2, and I set everything to work. But I think that's the only thing I needed to do there. Everything else should be back to normal. So the query we just ran here was this one. So now everything should say oops. So let's go ahead and actually run that query to check that that's what it's saying. So let's hit run. And you can see here that it says oops. So it's sort of, there's not much to see here, but all you can see is, look, we've got this thing that says oops, and it's coming from our query where we've basically asked it to list out the station names, the first 20 stations that it comes across. But it's not doing that because there's only one station and it's called oops. So what we now need to do is run the operation to sort of save ourselves here. So let's go down, and you can see here it says set query ID equals, okay, and it's got this query. So let's just sort of decipher this a little bit more. I blew past it last time, but now we're here. We're going to sort of interrogate this a little bit more. So the first thing is here, set the query ID. Now remember I was talking about variables. This is where this is coming in. So whatever this query returns, it's basically going to be setting it to be the query ID that we want to use in the future. And we can see this here because you see this query ID that we basically set here. It's then used in the next query. So we're sort of preloading a variable into a sort of a box, as it were. We're putting something in a box, and then in the next query, we're going to take it out of the box and use that result. So the query we're trying to find, let's just go to the next step. So select the query ID from, and it's basically saying, look, the table. So essentially there's this information schema.query history by session. So I think it's in here. And what we need to do, query history by session. I believe that is actually a table that is somewhere here on the left. I think it might be something that I cannot see. This is a weird one because this is a view, to be fair, as well. So it's not exactly, this is a good point. So this isn't, yeah, this is a view from the information schema. So rather than the actual thing. So I don't think I'm going to be able to see it here. But essentially, there's a table inside of this information schema setup. And in fact, let's take a detour and see if I can go find it. I really don't know what I'm doing here if you haven't figured it out. So let's go to City Bike and let's see what we can find. Okay, so you see it's not here. It's sort of separate. I'm pretty certain this is separate. So if we go in here, see if there's anything called query history. There isn't. So these are the views and information schema catalog. So I think this is where sort of my knowledge on this is sort of not quite there yet, but I'm fairly certain that if I go back here, you can see the table information underscore schema dot query history by session. So in here in information schema, I believe there's a table called query history by session. And in that, we basically want to return the last 5 queries essentially, and where the query text is like update. So basically you're searching for any query that uses this term update, and you order by start time and limit it to 1. So it's basically gonna go get the last 5, and then it's going to find the one that says specifically update and just return that one. So let's go ahead and run this and hit run. So let's just select that, hit run. And so yeah, that sort of statement has run successfully. If I wanted to find out what that query ID was, I believe I could just do this. So everything up until there is in brackets. So I believe I could just essentially do this. And if I just run that, I should just get the query ID. Okay, so let's just run that. So you can see this is the query ID that's in question. So what I did there is I just ran this query without the ability to set the query ID as a variable. So I basically left that out of the selection. And so it's giving me the query ID here. Whereas before, because it set the variable to query ID, we couldn't see it. So it just told me that it was successful. So this is sort of a nice little way of just validating what it's going to have. So then the next step is to create or replace trips dev as essentially the table from this specific point in time. So what we're doing is we're essentially creating the table again. We're going to overwrite it. That's why it says create or replace with a copy from back in time before this query was run. So that's how this works. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is the moment of truth. So let's go ahead and run this and make sure this all works. It doesn't work. So a statement cannot be used to specify time for time travel query. So this is interesting. So what's going on here? So statement 019C. So this is the right query. It cannot be used to specify time for time travel query. Interesting. So what does this actually mean? So you know what, when you get stuck, what you got to do with these things is go to Google. So this is a different issue to what I had before. Like last time I ran this, I ran into another issue where I just basically didn't do something right, and then it started being sort of a bit funny. So let's just remove the query because that's not useful for the statement. Cannot be used to specify time for time travel query. Okay. So here we are. This is a Stack Overflow, the place of all answers. Let's find out what's going on here. I would like to use a time travel feature on Snowflake and restore the reader table. I've deleted and created a table using the following command. I would like to go back in the reader time. I've used the following code, hid the transaction ID to blah blah blah. Select from such a before statement. Received an error message, right? After dropping the table, creating a table with the same name creates a new version of the table. Drop version of the previous table can still be restored using okay. Right. Looks like there's 3 common reasons that error is seen with solutions. The table has been dropped and created. Let's see this answer. The time travel period has been exceeded. No solution target. Not the case because we are within our time. The wrong statement type is being targeted. Okay. So none of these are useful. So let's go to just do the old hack way. Snowflake time travel and try and figure out what's going on. So This is not how I wanted this to go. Last time I had a different issue when I was doing on my own. And just when I thought I'd figure it out, something else is causing the problem. So select at before, clone at before, undrop. Okay, time travel retention 1 to 90 days. Okay, do we have an example query here? Or am I being lazy? I just want to get to a query and just see how it's run. Okay, cool. So select star from my table at timestamp. But without the following query, selects historical data from a table as of 5 minutes ago. Okay, so let's try this one. The following query selects. So these all select, but I think what we want to do is to, yeah, essentially this is what it's actually doing in the query. So create table, cloning. We're creating a clone, but in this case, create or replace is what you want to use. So create table, restored table, clone by table at timestamp. So basically you're specifying the exact time there. The following create schema command creates a clone of a schema and all of its object as existed 1 hour before the current time. That doesn't make sense. So what I could do is I could try and use this one. So I could try and basically use this offset one potentially just to go back in time and actually do proper time travel, or this. The following create a database command creates a clone of a database and all of its objects as they existed prior to the completion of the specified statement. So, all right, so this is actually what we're trying to do. So interesting. So we actually know the query. We managed to get that anyway because we asked what that was. Create database, restore DB clone my DB before the statement. So create. It's a clone of the database and all this. Create or replace. Interesting. So I think. Okay, what I want to do is let's first run this one. Let's try and see if we can see the table before the actual query. That's step one, because then we know we've got the right thing working. So here's a query that I ran and it's obviously not working as it should be. So let's paste this one in here, okay? And we know that this is the actual query that we were trying to work with before. So let's go ahead and place that there. So now we've got everything set up. I want to basically go and run this query. So this is going to be essentially should be returning the data before we changed everything to oops. So if I still see oops, this has not worked. So let's hit run and let's see what happens. So object my table does not exist, of course, because I'm looking at the wrong table. So I think I need to replace this to devs. It's the classic problem when you copy and paste because you know, you're not paying attention. So select star from trips dev before the statement. Okay, so this should be correct now. I'm fairly confident this has got to be working. So let's hit run. Okay, so cannot be used to specify time for the time travel query. So this is interesting. Statement cannot be used to specify time for time travel query. I'm wondering what's going on here. So let me think about this for 1 second. Think I know the issue. Think I know the issue here. So can you see, you've all probably been shouting at me in the screen, but I've only just figured this out. So minor detail, but very, very, very important. So you see here, trips dev and trips, trip dev and trips. What's wrong here? I'm trying to run this time travel query on the wrong table. So let's get this correct. I don't know why this is wrong. I don't know if it's maybe if you're running this exercise, tell me if that is wrong for you, because if it is, then it's not just me who's had this problem, but I likely think I changed this worksheet somehow, working through this, trying to play with a few things, and it's kind of come back to bite me. But I think this is it. So let's now, everything should still be set up. We've still got my query ID set up. So if I run this, for example, and I've set it to 60 because the time limit is sort of moving on here. So let's hit run and you'll see here that it does return the right query. And oh, interesting. I might be doing this. No, I'm doing this in the right place. So everything is in trips dev. trips dev, trips dev, trips dev. Yes, that's correct. And now if I try and run this, this should work. So if I try and run that, does that work? No, it doesn't work. So then just to double check that it's not me being an idiot with this trips dev statement here. So this is everything set now. Hit run, and that doesn't work as well. So both of these are just not working the way I expected them to work. I wonder why. Okay, so this is not working, which is, I can't honestly understand what's not working here. If you're watching this on Premiere, you're probably telling me, but I'll be sat in the comments basically nodding my head, having figured this out. So let's just try and see what's going on here. So create or replace table trips dev. Okay, let's go check this query. So what I want to do is I just want to quadruple check. Let's go to the history and let's just see if we can see what's going on here. Still loading up, and there we go. So I can add a filter, and I think we can filter to a specific query. Yeah, query ID. So let's just paste that query in there, hit plus, and that should basically just return this one query. And oh, actually this query didn't run, so this might be the wrong query. So let's just double check this. What did this do? Update trips dev does not exist. Yeah, so that one didn't work. Okay, so of course, okay, this is weird. Okay, so I figured it out. So this oh god, this is how do I explain this? So this is probably the third time I've said I figured it out, but nonetheless, let me try and explain. So you see here it says trips dev 2. Okay, now what happened was in the previous exercise, I got something wrong, and essentially I had to redo the whole exercise with the dev 2. Right, this is like a couple of weeks ago when I ran this. So when I did everything with dev 2, of course, the first time I ran this, if we rewind and go back when I first ran this, I first ran this update trips dev 2. Which makes sense, and of course it didn't work. So this is actually the wrong query. The query that I'm telling it to use never successfully completed, and therefore it's sort of struggling with time travel because this query didn't complete. I think that's what's going on. So if I go back and I look at the time and I say this is 1:10:36. Okay, so let's go back to the full history. Let's remove that filter. And I think what we can do is we can just go back in time. So 1:10:36. So you see, this is the one that didn't run. Okay. And the one that actually did run is this one. Okay. So query ID, this one. So if I actually highlight this and click on it, I was actually going to copy it, but you can see this is the one that actually ran successfully. So I actually got the wrong query. So if I copy that, you can see the number of rows updated was 61 million. So update trips dev start time station quickness. So this is the one that actually made the mistake, that actually changed the database. And because this was successful, this query should technically have something captured in terms of time travel. That's what I think is going to happen. So let's come back here and let's change this to the right query. Okay, so now you can see this query is changed. And I'm going to run this query to see what the table looked like before that mistake. So let's run that, and this should work. Here we go. I think this is working. And yes, so here we go. This is working because I can see everything coming back. It's going to take time because it's a big table. I should have just limited it to the first 20 rows or something, shouldn't I? Oh man, I wish I'd done that. It's too late now. It's running, so it is what it is. I could have just stolen this from here, for example, limit equals 20. I don't want to abort because, you know, it's done most of the work. I think this one takes like 30 something seconds. So give it some time and let's see what happens here. It's only a real problem if it takes over a minute. So actually I'm going to abort this and we're going to grab this limit statement and just bring back the 20 because that's still going to be faster than what I was planning to do. So let's do this and paste that there and then run these two lines, hit run. Here we go, loading metrics, and there we go. So you can see that works. The time travel is working because the station name, start station, is 435. These are all different. So we fixed it. Gosh. So moral of the story, if you ever break something in a tutorial, don't trust yourself to be able to, you know, return everything back to how it was. Make sure the content, you've sort of taken a hard copy of the content and you start from afresh, because I sort of self-inflicted that pain on myself here because of an issue I made 3 weeks ago, right? And I didn't sort of triple check the SQL that I was running as a result. So now that we've got this running, I feel fairly confident we can actually get something to work. So I'm actually going to cheat here a little bit. I'm going to set the query ID to this. So I'm not going to use this query, because the issue with this query is it's returning the wrong one, because I ran one update query that failed and one update query that was successful, and it picks the first one, which is the one that was unsuccessful. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to set the query ID to this value here. Okay. And we're just going to highlight that. I think that might need to do that at the end, and then just do this and hit run. Okay, so that statement executed successfully, which now means my query ID is in the variables. So I can now here select create or replace table trips dev and use the original SQL that was given to us. Hit run, and now this should restore the table. So let's hit that and wait. This should take a bit of time, but yeah, you can see that it is starting to work, because it wouldn't sort of go this far if it wasn't working. So you know what, I think I've earned a sip of coffee while this runs, so I'm gonna have a small break and just pat myself on the back for figuring that out, even though it was self-inflicted. There we go, it's actually finished, so no chance for a coffee anyway. So wow, gosh, that was good. That was good to figure out. This is the kind of stuff you sort of pick up as you learn, and you know, it's just part of the sort of nature. So the last thing we can now do is check that everything has been restored. So let's go ahead, select start station name as station and hit run, and then hit run again, and then we should see that the station names have been restored. Okay, so that's the end of section 7. We can now go on to the next one. It's actually section 8 in the guide. If you're following the guide, let me minimize this and go back to the guide. It's actually the end of section 8, using time travel. The next thing is going to be talking about role-based access controls, account usage, and account admin. Okay, so we'll get stuck into that now. So let's get stuck into role-based access controls, account usage, and account admin. In this section, we'll explore aspects of Snowflake's role-based access controls, RBAC. That's not a nice acronym to sort of shorten, so it'll just be RBAC from now on, such as creating a new role and granting it specific permissions. We'll also cover the account administrator role. Okay. To continue with the CityBike story, let's assume a junior DBA has joined CityBike and we want to create a new role for them with less privileges than the system-defined default role of sysadmin. Now, role-based access control. Snowflake offers very powerful and granular role-based access control that dictates what objects and capabilities a user can access and what level of access they have. For more detail, check out the Snowflake documentation. If you smash that, it actually opens up a browser tab, and you can actually get an overview of access control here. And it gives us a little guide as to what you can do. So here we go. We've got a little flowchart. There's nothing like a good role-based flowchart that tells you what happens where. So there's obviously there's always a flow, basically, because permissions typically have to sort of start somewhere. They have to basically check something first in order for them to work, and nearly all activities go through this flow essentially. And if you don't sort of meet the permission requirements, you don't sort of make your way through this flow, then essentially you basically get booted out of the system and you get denied access to whatever you're trying to access. So it's no surprise that there's obviously a hierarchy of what you can sort of not only secure, but also what you can do with those permissions as well. So you've got this little sort of chart that shows you what you can secure. So securable objects, accounts, users, role, databases, warehouses, objects, schemas, and then the things in those schemas, so table views, stage, stored procedure, UDFs, and other schema objects. And so I'm not going to sort of kind of go through this in depth. I think maybe this is worth another video once I get sort of a lot more comfortable with it. But if we go back to if I just minimize this and I just go back to this view here, you can see that we're basically going to just work through the exercise and try and create this. So in the worksheet, switch to the account admin role to create a new role, account admin. Account admin encapsulates the sysadmin and security admin system defined roles. Okay, so that's interesting. It's a top level role in the system and should be granted only to a limited number of users in your account. In the worksheet, run this command. So essentially we need to switch to this role because this role has like God power over the whole entire system, and that's why this says only a few people should have it. There's this principle in cloud technology that you should only have access to do whatever you need to do, and if you can even go as far as when you want to do that, then that's an even better way of doing it. So in AWS, it's not unfamiliar for you to be given access maybe to do something very briefly through a role or through some sort of identity access management sort of definition. And then when you no longer need to do that, it's immediately removed through some sort of procedure. And that's just sort of good security cloud practice. Okay. And I think this is sort of coming through here inside of this. I wouldn't even be surprised if, because Snowflake runs on AWS, it's using a little bit of the identity access management sort of, let's say, philosophy to actually do this and actually get this to work. So let's go ahead and use the role account admin. So you can do this a couple of ways. It's showing you how, but I'll sort of go over that here. The first way is obviously if you go up here to this little window, you can obviously just go in here and change this to whatever role you have. Just so you clear this is the sort of drop down of roles. Now I have my own roles in there. So I have 5 sysadmin, which is a sysadmin account for Fivetran for it to be able to do specific things. It's actually not a sysadmin. I've just called it sysadmin because it's like the Fivetran's own account to do its own things. But essentially, you've got these other roles here that are sort of default. So sysadmin, account admin, and public are default. If I just sort of go out of this, there's a couple more: security admin and user admin as well. So these all sort of restrict what someone can do. Pretty telling what they all do. User admin, I assume, will be able to go in, add users and do a bunch of things. Security admin will be able to go in and maybe change things like securities and permissions. And then you'll have a sysadmin who will go in and be able to do a bunch of other things as well. So this is sort of one way of changing it. Now, there's a slight thing that you need to be sort of wary of. There's 2 places you can change this. So over here, what you're doing is you're changing it within this sort of query window context. Everything we're doing essentially over here is controlled through this set of permissions. But there is actually another one here at the top. If I just highlight it in green, this is the one that actually changes sort of your perspective of the whole entire system and management. So if I was to, for example, go to the history tab, I'm looking at this as a sysadmin because that's what's running here at the top left hand side. Whereas when I'm in the worksheet and I'm running queries, I'm actually over here specifying the permissions that I'm going to be using whilst I run queries. So I might be logged in as a sysadmin, but then decide to run queries using the account admin roles, which is sort of a slightly weird way of doing it, but definitely something you can do. Okay. So the other place is obviously here at the top. I can switch the roles, and here you can see the default is sysadmin. I can of course go to account admin as well, and then you're pretty much good to go. So let's just go ahead and check what we need to do for the next exercise. So what I will do is I'll switch this top one here. We're already account admin in the query, and if I just double check, the sysadmin is here. So in order for a role to function, we need to at least one user assigned to it. So let's create a new role called junior DBA and then make sure that's assigned. Okay. And then we're going to switch to that role. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. And assign your username to it. Your username appears at the top right of the UI. In the screenshot below, it is a user123. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And you can see if I just go here, use a role account admin. So we'll hit run on that. And you just want to validate that that's actually kicked in. So you can see that that has, because the account admin role is right here. So we are now an account admin. And then what we're going to do is create this role, junior DBA. Now, we're going to just do this through the query interface. And you can see here, the way we do this is we create the role, surprise, surprise. Then we grant that role specific permissions. So grant role junior DBA to user Jeremy P. Your username goes here. Okay, so my username, this is a really interesting question. So what I should do is I should say Tableau Tim. Actually click cancel. I need to just delete this and go Tableau Tim TN-MD. Tableau Tim TN-MD. Okay. I think that's right. I'm just making sure it's exactly the same as up there. So then let's run this query and see if that's the right thing to do. So hit run. Okay, that statement sort of completed successfully, so I'm pretty sure my user was correct there. So now what I can do is I can go in here and use role junior DBA. So if I hit run there, we can then review this step. So here we go. So essentially what we did is we created a role, then we attached the role to my user so that my user can use that role. And now I can use that role, junior DBA. Now for the record, if I go back here and I change this, just because I was attached to that role doesn't mean I don't have access to my other ones. I still can switch to other roles. I'm just choosing to go and sort of do this as if I was a junior DBA. So I haven't sort of downgraded myself. I haven't done that. I mean, I could. I'd nuke myself in doing that. I'm sure there's probably some fail-safe to stop the last person in Snowflake from doing that, because otherwise you lose access to everything, right? If I go down here, you'll see that, yep, I still have access to all my other roles, but now I'm just working as a junior DBA essentially, okay? So now that we've done that, we can see that that's working. I can even go up here, I believe, and switch the role. I think I need to update this window. So let's refresh that, because the query window is slightly separate from the other window outside of it. So until I refresh, I believe, yeah, you see, so you can see here now the junior DBA is actually in the list, and I'm actually here still an account admin. If I go down to where we need to be, where is this module 8 here? So this is what we just ran, and we use role junior DBA. We now actually need to be at this account admin role. So when we refresh, it came back to account admin, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to double check that that's what we need to use. Just hit run again, make sure we're absolutely aligned with this exercise. And now what we can do is we can grant usage on database city bike to the junior role. So what we're not doing is giving individual people access to things. We're giving roles to these people. So this is again very similar to AWS, where you don't give people access to something, you put people in groups and then you assign permissions using those groups. That's a much easier way of making sure that you have the right set of permissions to a group of users. So let's go ahead and we can run these one by one, but I'm actually going to run them together like that. So let's just do this and hit run. Because we're account admin, this should work. You can see here statement executed successfully. And now if we go back to use this role and hit run. Okay, so now we're going back to a junior DBA role. So if you want to double check that, you can see that just up here. I used the wrong annotation tool, my bad. Let's get this arrow here, and yeah, you can see I'm now a junior DBA. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and basically run the following items. So I think what's actually going on here, if I just go back in here, what we're doing is, yeah, essentially, if I refresh this left-hand side, so now I'm a junior DBA, I've been given access to weather, city bike and weather. So if I go to city bike, you can see that's there, and weather is now there. Okay, and before that, I didn't have access to that. So I sort of didn't pay attention there. So I kind of missed the ability to see that that was actually there. So know the city bike now appear, try clicking refresh icon if they do not. Okay, so essentially I think I missed that step there. I didn't clock that we had to basically go back and check because I was looking in this interface. But essentially what we did is we created a role as a junior DBA. We then assigned ourselves to that role so that we could assume that role essentially. Then we basically went back to our account admin status, and we gave access to city bike and weather to the junior DBA. So the junior DBA could actually see these databases. And having done that, we were then able to sort of go back to our junior DBA role and actually see the data there. So what you would have not seen, I didn't show you this, but what you would not have been able to see is weather and city bike. They would not have been there. You would have seen maybe the others, but not these two. Then when we gave access, these two would have appeared, and then you would have been able to sort of work with them. Okay. So let's go down here. We can go back to use the account admin. So I'm going to actually do that now. I'm going to run these two again, make sure we're going back to being the right set of permissions. So now we're account admins, okay? And if I just go back and just go down, it just goes through a couple of other things. Okay, so there's not much sort of there in terms of the analytical perspectives. Essentially, it goes through the account admin, which I think I already did earlier on in the video. So in the first, I think in the second series, I actually went through to the account admin. So if I go here, switch role to the account admin at the very top, you'll see that we essentially get access to billing and history and account. Here you go. So you can go to the account. And then here you can actually see how I'm using Snowflake. So you can see I have 6 gig of data, 5 warehouses. I've used about 20 credits, and a credit is worth about €2.50 or something like that. So I've used about £40 worth of credits in this particular month. Makes a lot of sense because I have been loading a lot of data. Like today alone, today is the 22nd, so today alone I've actually used 3 credits, and that's because I'm going through this video. So if you're wondering, hey, how much does it cost to go through all of this stuff? Well, it's $3.55, and don't forget, I actually ran the whole entire series of queries up until the point where this video starts because I was actually setting everything up. I didn't have this sort of persisted, as it were. Between the last video and this video, I've actually had to do a bit of tweaking on this whole environment, so I didn't actually have these available. So I sort of wiped it and then reset everything back for this particular exercise, because of course last time I made a mistake and I didn't want that to carry through, but I couldn't avoid that plight, unfortunately. So it's cost me a bit of additional, like it's like £3 or £4, which is just fine for this video. So it's totally okay. But you can see on other days where I've not used it that much, you can kind of see how many credits are actually being used. Let's look in here. You can see this is again me running things. So I have a system called Fivetran, which is another tool. I'll maybe do another video on it in the future. But essentially, this is using up a very small amount of credits, loading up data into Snowflake. It's actually like trivial. It would cost you a lot more to sort of do what Fivetran is doing itself, just if you hide someone. So it's a really good tool. I'll do a video on it in the future. But essentially you can see here everything that's going on. So billing, users, roles, policies, sessions, resource monitors, reader accounts. I won't go to billing because that has some of my own private card details in there. If I go to users, you can see all the different users, the ones that have expired, the ones that haven't, and how they're all set up. You can see here that I have the Fivetran username, and you can see their sort of login. The display names are fine. It's the passwords that are probably a bigger issue. Roles, we just created the junior DBA role, so you can see that it's just here who it was created by, when it was created. It's kind of good to know. Some of this other stuff was bulk copied in by Snowflake for this particular demo. Policies, again, I think these are to do with permissions. So this is, this is network policies. Actually, I should have seen that coming. So this is to do with how you can restrict how people access your database. So let's say you want to only allow people from a specific address to sort of access your database. This is something I should probably do. I have a static IP, so I should maybe make this so that you can only access the database from my static IP, because that makes it even more secure. If someone tries to access something from outside of that, then essentially it would just behave like it didn't exist. It would just block the network request. It doesn't even hit the Snowflake database to say, hey, this is what's going on. So it's a very AWS feature. That sessions, these are basically people doing stuff. So this is going to be me, and you can see how I logged in and authenticated. Resource monitors. Now, if you want to track how much resources are being used, you can create a resource monitor here, and you can create limits. And so essentially, once you hit a certain limit, you stop doing certain things, or you sort of stop people doing certain things. So this is good. Let's say a business has a certain budget and they want to make sure that every single day they don't go over a certain limit. This might just sort of be a good thing to roll in, because then it makes whoever's working on the database, be really sort of consistent, and they can really sort of spread out the cost of how they're using this. Maybe let's say that you have an improved budget one particular quarter, but then a smaller budget in another. You could sort of switch these monitors on in different sort of periods of time to sort of grow or contract how you're using things, so that people kind of stay within their boundaries. And I believe reader accounts are just, let's actually tells us here. So reader accounts enable providers to share data with consumers who are not already Snowflake customers without requiring the consumer to become Snowflake customers. So essentially you can create an account, and then someone can actually basically connect to your Snowflake instance and start using them without having to create a Snowflake account, which is kind of cool. So this might be something I do for a Tableau challenge in the future. So you can obviously create an account name and get people going on that. So that's really cool, right? It's a really sort of nice way of using it and making sure that everything works. So let's go back in here and see if they covered anything else. So we looked at the usage. You can see what's going on. That's pretty much it. Let's go to the next step, which is secure data sharing and the data marketplace. So we're kind of sort of towards the end of the series now. So Snowflake enables data access between accounts through share. Shares are created by data providers and imported by data consumers, either through their own Snowflake account or provision Snowflake Reader account. So we just saw the Snowflake Reader account there. This consumer could be an external entity or different internal business unit that is required to have its own unique Snowflake instance. So the use case here is you might have, let's say, a third-party business that you do business with who wants access to data. Or you could have an organization where every single part of the business has its own Snowflake account for specific reasons. Let's say HR and finance don't want their data to be shareable, so they might create different sort of Snowflake accounts rather than sort of having that risk that they're on the same account and therefore someone gets access to something that they shouldn't have. Then a share is a nice secure way of sort of making sure they can share data between each other without ever having to sort of mix the two things up. With secure data sharing, there is only one copy of the data that lives in the data provider's account. So if I'm sharing something with you, the only place where the data is kept is on my account. You're just accessing it on my account. So it's sort of an interesting dilemma, because in a lot of sort of B2B situations today, what's often required is some sort of sharing of data through FTP or Amazon S3. You dump the data here, we'll pick it up, we'll process it, and we'll do things. But as soon as you do that, you lose sort of custody of your data, because it essentially becomes someone else's data as well. They become sort of an owner of that as well. So it's nice here that Snowflake keeps it on your own account. Shared data is always live, real time, and immediately available to consumers. So if I update the data that I share, everyone else gets it straight away. Providers can establish revocable, fine-grained access to shares. So you can, use permissions really well to control how you're sharing everything. Data sharing is simple and safe, especially compared to older data sharing methods, which were often manual and insecure, involving the transfer of large CSV files across the internet. I mean, this still happens today. Snowflake here is talking like it's the thing of the past. It's still the prominent way of how data is shared in a lot of organizations, unfortunately. To share data across regions or cloud providers, you must set up replication. This is outside of the scope of the lab, but more information can be found in the Snowflake article. This is interesting. So let's say I want to do a Snowflake share with someone and their instance is not in Ireland. Let's say theirs is in Europe or America. What I'd have to do is I have to replicate my data from Snowflake setup in Ireland to a Snowflake setup in the US, where I'm also having sort of a Snowflake account. So if I go back in here, you'll see when I do this drop down, I get a little bit of information just here that says that I'm running an EU island. So this essentially means I can use Snowflake shares with other people running in the same region in Ireland. Now, EU island covers most of Europe. There's another region in Ireland, which I believe, what is the other region in sort of Europe? I want to say it's like Copenhagen. I have no clue, to be honest. I have to sort of dig it out. But essentially, if your data's in the same region, then it's really easy. And if you don't have the data in the same region, then what you're going to need to do is replicate it to a different region so that then you can share it from that region to other people in that region. Okay. So see existing share. So you can see, click on the blue Snowflake logo at the very top of the UI. On the left side of the page in the database object browser, notice the database Snowflake sample data. A small arrow on the database icon indicates that this is a share. This is kind of funny. I did actually wonder what was going on here. So let's go back in here to sysadmin. I sort of noticed this, but I sort of didn't know what to Google, and I thought, I'll probably come across this answer at some point. I had sort of other things that I thought were more important to learn. But if I go to the databases tab here, if I just click on the blue Snowflake logo, this sort of brings us back here, and this is a very subtle thing to notice, but you can just see here that there is this little arrow that says Snowflake sample data, and this is actually a share in itself. So Snowflake are really good here. They've sort of created a share so you can't mess it up yourself, and you can see here that this is actually a share. At the top right of the UI, verify that you're in the account admin role. So let's go ahead and do that. I just switched to sysadmin, but let's switch back to account admin. And once you are there, What does it want us to do? Okay. Looking at the inbound shares, there are 2 share provides by Snowflake. One contains your account usage and the other has sample data. This is data sharing in action. Your Snowflake account is a consumer of data shared by Snowflake. Right, so it's a sort of a strange relationship. But anyway, if we go back to shares, other account admin, you can see that we have account usage and sample data. So this is a very smart. So Snowflake obviously collects a lot of data in the background about what queries you're running, what you're doing. And interestingly, this data belongs to them. And then they share it back with you to show you how your account is doing. So it's a very interesting sort of structure, right? It's an interesting one. It's also sort of a weird relationship because it sort of assumes that, you know, Snowflake owns the metadata about everything you do on your database, and then they share it back with you, which is sort of a strange, it's a strange thing to say out loud, isn't it? You know, you're paying them for a service, but what they're doing is sharing your metadata back with you. I'd be a lot more comfortable if what this was sort of doing was to say, listen, we can't provide you any account analytics unless you share data with us so we can accurately do this. That said, they do price based on usage, so they do sort of have to have this in a way, but it's just that sort of, it's just the philosophy of that, just how it's termed is a little bit weird. The sample data you see here is also from Snowflake, so it's shared with us. It was created back in 2018, which is kind of interesting. This has been shared with lots of people, and it's probably just a standard thing that's available across a lot of Snowflake instances. So anytime we use that data, I believe it's not actually charging us because the usage is occurring on Snowflake's end, not on our end, okay? So, this data is blah, blah, blah. Your Snowflake account is a consumer of data shared by Snowflake. We can go ahead and create an outbound share. So let's go back into City Bike Story and assume we're the account administrator for the Snowflake at City Bike. We have trusted partner who wants to analyze the data in our trips on a near real-time basis. This partner also has their own Snowflake account in our region. So let's use Snowflake to allow them to access this information. Navigate to the shares tab. Further down on the page, click on outbound button. Okay, so basically what we want to do is go over here, go to shares and click on the outbound thing. And then I assume here we're going to hit create. So let's go ahead and hit create. And here we are. So let's just make sure we get the things right. So secure share name is trip share. So let's go ahead and grab that and paste that in. Just keep it nice and simple. Database is City Bike. I think this might have a drop down. Yeah, so I can just go ahead and look at that. Tables and views, select tables and secure views, 0 tables. So if I click on that, it'll obviously give me some sort of perspective. I could also sort of choose trips dev and trips, so you could do that. What do they recommend doing? Just trips. We don't need access to the devs instance, but what you could do, this is a very smart way, what you could do is you could create a clone of your original database and then give them access to that. And what that allows you to do is essentially sort of separate usage of your databases. So you can sort of very easily see that, hey, this data is being used over here and this data is being used over there. And if you maybe sort of continuously updating data into trips, but you don't want the same thing to be happening with dev, then it's a nice way of sort of doing that, because at the point in time when you clone things are sort of as they are, but from that point on they're sort of static. So you can sort of create some sort of snapshot just by creating a clone, giving people access, but then you know they're not going to continue to receive updates so that they can then sort of monetize or do something with. So it's kind of nice. Click apply. That's everything. And you get this sort of interface to show you what you've added. You can add more things to the share if that makes sense. So City Bike public trips. Yep. Now that's all done. Click apply, then create. Note that the window indicates the secure share was successfully created. So let's hit create and let's see that going through. There we go. There's the share that's been done nicely. And everything is there, everything is good. So now we get asked, okay, like what warehouse would you like to use when that person is using this? So if we just go down, realistically, the City Bike account administrator would click on next and consumers button to input their partner Snowflake account name and type. We will stop here for the purpose of this lab. Click on done button in the bottom of the box below. Okay, so what they're basically saying at this point, you might specify a bit more information. So you'd add consumers and you'd sort of start to give people access, but because we're doing a lab, it's not sort of got that option. So we'd need to create some reader accounts, of course. to then point into this place. So first we create the share, then we create the accounts. The accounts will go off to someone else who's maybe not a Snowflake user, and then they're able to come in and start using this. But we're just going to hit done and sort of end that there. And so you can actually see here that says trip share, add consumer, city bike. There are no consumers. So I've shared it, but I'm not sharing it with anyone because I haven't actually added them in. Okay. So that's it. Snowflake provides several ways to securely share data without compromising confidentiality. You can share not only tables and views, but also secure views, secure UDFs, user-defined functions, and secure joins. For more details on how to use this, check out the documentation. So again, another video. There's my dog yawning again. Every video now, he just yawns. And last time he was snoring, today it's yawning. Is it boring, buddy? Is it boring? Huh? Okay. Navigate to the data marketplace tab. So now we're going to look at the data marketplace. So let's go have a look at that. So here we are, data marketplace, and it's going to have a big fat explore the data marketplace button. Select the explore. It's your first time using the data marketplace. The following login screen will appear. Enter your credentials to access Snowflake Data Marketplace, and so I just want to get an idea what kind of things are in there. Let's go have a look. I think I have actually been in here, so I don't think I need to create a username. In fact, I opened up a new tab, so let's bring that into view, and let's just see what happens here. So you can see it's got the new interface rather than the old one. So whereas here in the guide, it kind of does have the more modern looking interface, but for sure, I'm absolutely certain that you can see here that it's got some more of the sort of more recent things that we've been using. So these are going to be, I guess, providers that do various things on Snowflake data. So US census income data set, reduce bias. So yeah, you can sort of dynamically load census data into your Snowflake instance. So I guess these are going to be places where you can go and either find data sets, I guess that's what it is, or companies that can do things to your data set for you. Interesting. So there's lots of different unified identity, custom identity management. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's always difficult to know how these stores sort of define themselves. You never really want to put yourself in a particular category because then it means you exclude a bunch of other categories. But it's nice to be able to see, that essentially what providers seem to be providing is data sets that you can integrate into your own, that are sort of aggregated or cleansed. And someone's put a lot of time into this particular type of data, and then they've basically sort of made it consistent and made it sort of easy for you to use. Let's go back into the lab and just see what point are they trying to make here. The search bar on the top allows you to query for listing or data provider. The left-hand side menu shows the categories for data available in the data marketplace. Select the health category. Okay, so yeah, you can go in and connect to some health data and different data types. Today we'll use star schemas, COVID-19 epidemiological data. Make sure you use your in the account admin ROM. Okay, so this is interesting. So here we go. We're in the what role are we in? How do I know what role I'm in? This is a new interface as well, so I'm just completely lost. So let's just type in here health and star schemas, epidemiological data. I can't say that word, it's a bit of a tongue twister. And this is what's going on. Now here's a role. Make sure you're an account admin. Okay. And what's it saying about this? So here you can select the data and click on the get data button to access information within your Snowflake account. And then you go through some permissions and so on and so forth. So interesting. Get total case count by country. So this is the COVID-19 epidemiological data. Yeah, that is the one that they were talking about. Okay, so what's going on here? So if I just select get data, let's see what happens. Database name, which roles in addition to account can access this data, sysadmin. I'm just sort of guessing this as I go through. So it's basically made it available to all of them. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. So let's just then five sys doesn't need it. So let's just do that. And I accept Snowflake terms and conditions. Create database. Let's go. View database. there it is, star schema, AWS, EU West, COVID-19 data set. That's cool. That's cool. So basically, I'm getting lost here between all the different instances of Snowflake that I have because it's using a new interface. So eventually, once it's created a database, you can now go view the database. We've done that. You can break that down into different sort of tables. So let's go ahead and just browse. I'm going to do this in the new interface so you can see what's going on. So we should go to the public here. And if I go to what's going on, so this is schema details. So we want the tables. Let's go to this and see what they have. So they do have quite a lot of data from various places, right? And last updated between a year ago and 2 months. So these are public shares. So I think they're sort of adding data to this over time. You can see how many million rows some of these have. So you have the Apple mobility data. Do we have the Google Global Mobility Report? Yes, we do. 5.4 million rows of data. So that's really, really cool. They've made that available. This did stop roughly a year ago because I think what this data was used to do was to basically make sure that people had stopped using transport. So it's nice that you can get this data and it's sort of readily available, which is cool. I really like that actually. It's a nice way of working as well, because essentially the data still belongs to Star Schema. They've done the work and I'm basically just using it through the marketplace there, and it's sort of made available to me, which is really nice. Now I think this is a free data set, so this is why. I should actually correct one thing. This is not a share. This is from the data marketplace. So once I get the data, it's actually in my own Snowflake instance. So it takes up storage and it takes up my own credits when I use it. And that was incorrect of me to say otherwise just before that. So yeah, this is pretty much nicely set up. I'm pretty certain that we're pretty much at the end of this. So if I just go down, we can kind of see a few more sort of contextual information to do with the marketplace. But there we have it. I think we're pretty much at the end of this now. We're going to reset our account to how it should be before. So what I'm going to do is, because we've brought data in from the marketplace, I'm going to keep that in there because it's kind of fun to play with. But what we will do is we will go ahead and run this. So I'll close this browser window because that's sort of confusing me. And we'll go back to our worksheet. I think I did actually add the commands here. So here we go. Yeah, so we've got this particular information. So we can actually make sure that we're doing the right thing. So use role, account admin, use warehouse compute, use database weather, schema public. So let's run this. This will just help us reset everything back to where it should be, because we're a junior DBA at the moment. Now we're back to being at weather. And so now we can just highlight this, and basically this is going to delete everything. So if you look here on the left hand side, this is going to reset everything. So all that data that I've uploaded from S3 that isn't mine is all going to get deleted. The only things we should have left are my own databases, obviously the TN-Media 1, TN-MD5 Tran, maybe the utility database, the shares. So you see, this is interesting. So you know how I said the data marketplace data wasn't a share? Actually, it turns out I'm incorrect. This is actually a share. So if you look at this here, it has that little icon, which means it is actually a share. So have to dig into that. I don't know enough about the marketplace rep to really understand the dynamics of that. So like, you know, when you get data from the marketplace, whose credits are being used when you run queries on that? That's sort of something I'm not clear about. Are you just buying data, but then you're using someone else's credits? That doesn't seem to make sense. So maybe there's sort of a model around that would then make sense. But let's go ahead and drop these tables. So let's go ahead and run these, and you should see this will start to clear everything. And the last thing you'll see is a junior DBA has completed successfully, but it did actually run all the previous ones. I know that because if I hit refresh, you'll see that City Bike and weather have disappeared. So we've just wiped everything that we did during this exercise. And yeah, we're pretty much back to normal now. The only thing I've got left is Snowflake, the Snowflake sample data, and the star schema AWS EU West COVID-19 data by star schema. So that's really, really cool. It's really nice to sort of see that. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of this little series I've been doing. So if we go back here and actually we look at the last steps, they've got a conclusion and steps of what to do next. I've really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed sort of going through this. I will definitely be doing this every week. Next week, I'll probably be taking something different on in relation to Snowflake. But I think it's been a really nice way to sort of get familiar with the database. Like if you'd use Tableau and this is all you did, this would be enough to get you comfortable with Snowflake, like using it day to day. Because everything else you can kind of research after the fact. So you don't need to become like a database expert to understand what's going on. But if all you did was spend an hour and a half just going through this guide, you'd know what Snowflake is, you'd know the advantages, you'd be able to talk about it, and you'd be able to at least engage someone who is a DBA on what should be done here and how you could use it in your day-to-day. So I think it's really, really cool. I think it's a really nice database. It's something I have to learn more about anyway, so I'll be pushing on with my learning. So yeah, maybe we'll take on another Snowflake guide, or maybe we'll sort of go off piece and just start making our own content around that. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe, do whatever, share it with everyone. We're really interested to know your thoughts about this. Should this be something I do every Sunday? Should it be something I continue to do? Are you learning stuff from it? Is it helpful to you? I'd be really keen to know that as well. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.